Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel. Today we are about to discuss 10 types criteria. What criteria, what standards do we use to determine whether or not a nation is descended from the lost 10 tribes of Israel to a significant degree, to a degree that has been important from an historical sense, and that in biblical terms we may identify as belonging to the lost 10 tribes. The lost 10 tribes were the major portion of the Israelite nation. The Israelite nation was composed of two sections, which had divided into two after the death of King Solomon. There was Judah, that is the present-day Jews, the ancestors of the present-day Jews in the south, and there were the 10 tribes in the north. The 10 tribes were conquered by the Assyrians, taken into exile, and by different pathways from their places of exile they moved, or they progressed towards the west, and they are now to be found amongst Western nations. But not all nations in the West belong to them, and not every place they pass through can now be considered as the heritage of the lost 10 tribes, as where the lost 10 tribes are to be found. So that is what we're about to consider, and this is important for us because in the end times Judah, that is the Jewish people, and the 10 tribes of Israel are to be reconciled and reunited, and this is mentioned several times in the Bible. The prophet Ezekiel 37 speaks of two sticks. He is told to take two sticks. He is told to take a stick for Judah and for those of Israel who are united with him. Take two sticks, Judah in one hand, and to take another stick, a stick for Joseph, the stick or the tree or the wood of Ephraim, and to place it on the stick of Judah, and to combine them, and they shall be one stick in your hand. This is a prophecy. It is found in Ezekiel 37, as we see here in the biblical Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Hebrew text. And this is a promise of what will happen in the future. And this is something that we have to do, or have to direct our attention towards, to be aware of. In order to be aware of, we should know who the lost 10 tribes are, and there are proofs concerning who those 10 tribes are, and what standards, what measurements, what criteria we use to determine who belongs to the lost 10 tribes. So as a result of our biblical studies, we put together 10 standards and measurements, 10 criteria which work out, and which are based on scripture. So these 10 proofs they are, I'll go through the list, and the list doesn't necessarily have to be in that order, or it doesn't have to apply in every case, but on the whole, in general, I'll go through the list and read them out, and then we'll go back through them and add a little bit more detail to them. The list, the criteria which we found, the blessings, economic and physical blessings that the Israelites were to have, the 10 tribes were to have. So we have to find nations that have realized, that have enjoyed, that have benefited from the blessings in question. Not saying that every country that has enjoyed these blessings is automatically to be considered as an Israelite nation, but that is already one step in the right direction towards deciding whether or not a nation is of Israelite origin or not. We also have the historical groundwork, what we call groundwork, historical, archaeological, linguistic, mythological, general evidence that confirms, that heightens the possibility the lost 10 tribes are, or did reach those regions in question. Also have to have indications of scripture, the Bible prophecies and so on. Not only blessings, but other things that they would, geographical directions and other characteristics that that the Bible describes the lost 10 tribes as having. As when we find people with these characteristics, that too is another step, is another mark, positive mark for our inquiries. We also have to have a Judah. They are, the lost 10 tribes are, by definition, the brothers of the Jews, so we expect to find some degree of innate affinity, some degree of empathy for the Jewish people, at least a lesser degree of anti-Semitism, a lesser degree of Jew hatred relative to the time and the place and the circumstances than existed elsewhere. This is fair enough. This is another criteria. We also look for originality, innovation, intellect. We look for bravery, military prowess. This changes from time to time, from one circumstance to another, but it has to be there, at least to some degree. Empathy, doing of social justice towards others, towards themselves, amongst themselves, and towards other people. We also have to have had some type of Israelite self-identification amongst important segments of their population at some stage or other. They also need to have a family connection, that the peoples, we find the people here and the people there and people in another place, so that if we identify them with Israelites, and so each one that we identify as Israelite must have a proven ethnic linkage to the others, also to some degree. This is also logical. And there has to have a tribal affiliation. The lost 10 tribes, biblical indications are the lost 10 tribes, when they move, they stay together more or less in cohesive forms, and are destined to re-coalesce, to re-emerge, to keep some degree, to some measure, their tribal affiliation. People of the same tribes congregated together, and therefore we're justified, as we have done this in a book of ours and in our works, we're justified in identifying specific peoples, historical peoples, with specific Israelite tribes, or as portions of them. So we must do at least tentatively be able to show that one tribe or a couple of tribes did settle in certain regions amongst the Israelites in those areas may be ascribed to that tribal affiliation. So this is what we have, this is what we're going to talk about, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail now. The blessings, the Israelites were blessed. The Israelites were destined to be blessed, to receive blessing, physical and economical blessings in their places of exile, and this was prophesied. This is one of the reasons for them having being exiled, in order to fulfill the blessings, and also to carry out the task that they were given. There was a divine purpose in everything that was going on. There's a divine purpose for them being exiled, and they had a reason why this had to be done and the way that it was done, because they had to. Their task was to go down to the level of the Goyim, of the Gentiles, and to elevate themselves and the rest of the world along with them, as they have done to some degree. So they had to, they would have had, it was prophesied that they would rule over other peoples, especially Joseph. We find this in different sections of the Bible, in Genesis 27:29, 48:19, where it says a multitude of nations. In Hebrew it says that there would be a Malay Goyim, meaning, according to Uncle Asul, of other peoples, and also the Hebrew lends itself to this interpretation. And also the blessings to Jacob, that nations, peoples would serve you, and you would rule over other peoples, and so to Joseph. And also we have Psalms 47:3, that we also are told that there would be seafarers, they would go down to the sea. 42:10, that would be the dominant world power. Numbers 24:7-9, Micah 5:7-9. There would be a world military might. See Deuteronomy 33:27, 33:29, Jeremiah 51:20-21. That would be the battle axe of the Almighty, the enforcer of peace, and the policeman of the globe, as the British and the Americans to some degree after them have been and still are. See Jeremiah 51:20, Zechariah 10:7, that they would defeat Edom, as we identify Edom with mainly with Germany, Esau, but also with other powers in Europe, and the people, the British people and the other peoples whom we identify as being Israelites, have defeated them in the past. So these are the blessings, and also in addition to this we have physical characteristics, just a few of them, the physical characteristics which are also blessings, that they would number hundreds of millions, be extremely numerous. Genesis 15:5, 22:17, 24:16, 33:12, Numbers 23:10, Isaiah 10:22, and so on. They would possess agricultural plenty, Genesis 27:28, 49:2-5. Deuteronomy 33:13-16, and so on. They would control vast mineral resources, see Genesis 49:25, Deuteronomy 33:13 and 15, and they will rule over the gates of the enemies. Who would possess important strategic thoroughfares and pathways, This is in Genesis 27:17 and 24:60. This is and all of these blessings have come to fruition. They have come to pass in the Western peoples, especially in English-speaking nations. In addition to blessings, we have indications of Scripture in general. Scripture describing lost tribes in the end times as to where they would be, what they would be doing. And this too is the criteria that the nations whom we decide should be Israelite, or where Israelites are to be found, should meet these indications. Indications were intended for the end times. The indications are numerous, so some of them, we just go through some of them, include that the lost tribes will be at the ends of the earth, the geographical extremities of the continental masses, ends of the earth. They see Isaiah 24:16, 26:15, 41:8-9, 43:6, 49:6, and so on. There would be in islands, Isaiah 24:15, 49:6, 69, Jeremiah 31:9-10. And there would be in Thais, peninsulas, coastlands like North America, see Jeremiah 31:8. There would be connected with Tarshish, that is the area of the Atlantic Ocean, see Isaiah 69, and a western location on the whole, even though Australia and New Zealand are not exactly in the west, but they are offshoots of western peoples. So it applies to them. And the western peoples in question are the Scandinavian nations, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, also the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, France, Switzerland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, England, Scotland, and the offshoots in North America, Canada, and the USA, where we find most of the lost tribes in our time to be in the USA, but also in the other areas, and so we are not saying that everyone in these regions belongs to the lost tribes. We are saying that is where the lost tribes are. That is where they are, and what exact proportion of the peoples concerned do descend from Israel, we cannot say. But we do know that according to Scripture, that is where the lost tribes are, and that is the most important point, and that is a beginning for our studies and researches. We identify the land of Sinim as Australia and New Zealand, and we have reasons for this, and so too the inhabitants of Australia and New Zealand are ethnically and culturally related to peoples in the West, especially those from the British Isles. So this too is a proof. It says that there will be these lost tribes will be many waters, that is in several oceans, Numbers 24:7. That there will be in Zarephath, the Zarephath in Obadiah 1:20, verse 20, Zarephath means France, area of France. It also means Britain, and the area to the north of France. That is where the lost tribes are, and that is where it was prophesied they would be. We also have other indications. Manasseh, the same Manasseh given to the son, one of the sons of Joseph. Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh is the son, meaning responsible representation. Also, the firstborn son of Manasseh was Machir. Machir gave his name to North America. America is named after America Vespucci, who in turn received its name from a Latin permutation of the land Hamachiri, meaning the descendants of Machir, as this is linguistically proven. And so America is named after the firstborn son of Manasseh, and America has the aspects of Manasseh. So this too is a proof, and this too is an indication. We have, as we said before, we also need groundwork, historical, archaeological, linguistic evidence concerning where the lost tribes are. The lost tribes were taken to different portions of the Assyrian Empire at the beginning. Some were taken to the north, and others were taken directly by sea overseas to Spain. From Spain they moved into the British Isles, and to the north of the British Isles, north of Spain, into Gaul and into Scandinavia. But most of the lost tribes were taken overseas to different portions of the Assyrian Empire, to the northern Iraq, northern Syria of our days, the region of Armenia, Azerbaijan. From there they moved to the north, over the Caucasus Mountains into southern Russia, or first to the east, then to the west, and eventually after splitting up into different groups and in stages, in the course of centuries, they all eventually migrated to the west. And then they together in the west, they re-amalgamated. They joined together with other Israelites who were also there, and they reunited. And so we can see from out going through all this process of moving around and so on, and even though from the beginning they had already assimilated themselves to the nations around them, adopted their customs and their religion and other aspects of them, and forgotten who they were almost, and they forgot even more quickly after their time of exile, they still kept Israelite aspects of their culture and their behavioural patterns that can relate them back to Israel, also in their language and their legends and so on. So we find these, when we trace these peoples, we find remnants, we find indications that they still remained Israelites. They even call themselves Hebri or Iberi, which actually means Hebrew. They kept the name Hebrew everywhere they went. So this too is a proof, as we have discussed in another talk. So, but since they moved around, they moved in different areas, these different areas also retain remnants or indications of Israelites having been in those regions, but they are not Israelites at present. But so this is not a blanket. It's not a blanket hexshare. It's not a blanket. It's not something which automatically makes the people in the said regions Israelites. But it is another step when we take all of the different criteria together, and then we can decide to see which nations have fulfilled most of them or all of them, and which nations are Israelites and which nations are not, according to the Bible and according to objective proof. They should have affinity with the Jews. Judah, affinity with the Jews. It stands to reason they are brothers of the Jewish people. They are brothers of Judah, and therefore they should have retained some type of respect, innate recognition that they and the Jews are one and the same, or that there's some connection, family connection between them, or there's some reason for them to identify with each other. And even though in Isaiah 11:13 we indications that in the end times they will no longer oppress each other, no longer be antagonistic to each other, but meaning that indicating that before then they would have been, and even in the time before their exile, when Judah and the lost tribes were in the same land of Israel, there were occasionally wars and friction between the two groups, and there was a degree of antagonism between them. And we all know that sometimes fights within the family that can be the most fierce and savage and cruel and unrelenting struggles over them all. Nevertheless, the family connection should have given expression to itself to some degree, at some point. So this is another point, once again, innovation in intellect. This is getting back to they are considered to be brothers to the Jews. The Jews are known for intellect, for the intellectual achievements. The historical reasons led them to this. They already were, they had natural intelligence, and this intelligence was developed through history, through their religion, through being persecuted, through being forced to engage in professions that required intellectual prowess rather than physical prowess, and generation after generation we get something in the end, and the Jews got it, but never. So we don't expect them all to be at the level of Einstein, but we do expect them to have some minimum level of intellectual achievement and originality of thought historically, and this indeed is what we find. The lost 10 tribes, according to Scripture, should have some degree of, should be brave, should be warriors, have military inclinations, military talents, at least when required, when this is required of them for the sake of survival. This too is a criteria. In addition, they should have empathy, a sense of doing justice to themselves, amongst themselves, and also to other people. See Genesis 18:19. This is one of the reasons why they were exiled, to bring justice and judgment to the world, to the nations. And this is what they have done. So this too is a valid point, a valid standard of measurement of determining who belongs to Israel and who does not. We should have Israelite self-identification. What does this mean? This is a difficult point. It's not so clear as the others, but it exists. Every nation that we find has belonged to Israel. At some stage or other in its historical development had people in it, or sometimes large numbers of people, or especially amongst the intelligentsia, who consider themselves to be Israelites, who identified with ancient Israel. So this too is a point worth noting. As if instinctively they felt this and they knew it and they gave expression to it. To give a few examples, the USA had it amongst the founding fathers of the USA. There's books written on this. You can even look it up on the website. A lot of them call themselves Israel. They consider themselves like Israel, coming to found a place in the wilderness, so they would be the chosen people. They would go in the way of the God of Israel. And they identified themselves as Israel, the early Puritans, and not only them, but a lot of different other groups of the first settlers of the USA. They had this aspect of considering themselves to be Israelites, at least in the spiritual, cultural, or as far as the Almighty was concerned. And sometimes also in the physical sense. So too amongst English we find this occasionally. We find this in Anglo-Saxon legend. We find this in traditions and Welsh Hebrew origins and Irish legends, indications along these lines. And also in recent times we have movements like British Israel, even though we ourselves do have reservations about Israel, or at least not Israel as it originally, British Israel as it originally was, but as it allowed itself to become. But nevertheless, at the beginning, when it was a better organisation than it is at present, they had a lot of people identified with them, and they were able to spread their message because people instinctively saw that there could be something what they are saying, that the British and their associates were indeed descended from the ancient Israelites. Also the Finns of Finland had the idea that they descend from Israel. Books in Finnish on this. Also the Swedes and Danes also have legends along these lines. So too in the Netherlands and amongst the Frisians, who are a portion of the Dutch people, who have legends along these lines. Everywhere we go we find legends along these lines which show that of Israelites some type of innate instinctive identification as being descended from Hebrew stock. They should have family connections. If we identify one nation as having being Israelite in the biblical sense, as having Israelites amongst it, as being belong to the lost 10 tribes according to the Bible, therefore we should expect other nations who have been identified along the same lines as having a link, a proven historical, ethnic and cultural associations with this nation that we are considering. And this is what we do find. Each nation, the fruits of one nation, therefore, may be then be used to justify the identification of the other. And we have tribal affiliation. We identify different peoples as having Israelite tribes amongst them according to different signs. Each section has its own type of identifying marks, but they do exist. The Israelites, when they moved, they more or less stayed together in their original tribal groupings, or family groupings, or clan groupings, belonged to the tribes, and there was a tendency over the course of time for different groups to rejoin together. Different peoples of the same origin recoalesce. So the tribes, indications are that the tribes have reformed themselves. They are now to be found amongst Western nations, and to some degree we might identify specific peoples as having specific Israelite tribes predominant amongst them, and all different types of identifications. For instance, we find that in ancient times, in what is now Holland, there was a people there called Sabelin Goy. Sabelin is Zebulun, from the tribe of Zebulun. Goy means people, a people of Goy. That was the name of the people, Sabelin Goy, with an S instead of a Z, because then they didn't, in those lands, at that time, at that particular era of their development, they had lost the use of the Z and only used S. So that explains it linguistically why they call themselves Sabelin Goy instead of Zabelin Goy. But it's exactly the same. As also prophesied that Zebulun, the tribe of Zebulun, would dwell on the shores of the sea, and the people of Holland do dwell on the shores of the sea. 2/3 of Holland is literally speaking on seashores. They have the dikes which protect them from the floods of the sea, from the sea coming in, and from and they have also a large portion of the land which is actually reclaimed sea land, which was actually once under the sea, beneath the sea level, and they pushed it back. And all of the land of the area of Holland is sand, sea sand. They live on the seashores. That is the only country in the world about this, what this might be said, and this is a place where we found Sabelin Goy in ancient times living, And we have other identifications indicating to us that the tribe of Zebulun was to be prominent in that place. And so too for each and every one of the different places we find tribal identifications, so this has become a criteria for identifying who belongs to Israel and who does not. So out of all of these identifications, we find that the peoples we mentioned, they fit, most of them fit most of the criteria, and taking everything into consideration, they are the tribes of Israel, and they are the ones who fit the bill. They are the ones from whom we may expect the Israelites in the future to emerge. How this will come about we do not know, but we are commanded, or each and every one of us has a duty to do the best he can and to keep himself attuned to this possibility and to keep up to date with it and do what he can to help it along. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.